And I did start asking questions, and I did want to fact check.
It's like there's them, who's the real person, and then this monster, or in your case, like crazy portrayal of them that you believe through all this time. And then as you're trying to gather evidence for yourself, maybe you get closer and closer to the real version. But in my mind, it's like, how will I ever have an unfiltered, natural perception of who my father is, you know?
And I did start asking questions, and I did want to fact check. Right.
Hi, and welcome back to the Anti-Alienation Project. I'm Madison, and today is part 2 from our last episode. So if you haven't watched episode part 1 of her story, please definitely watch it. I'll try to put a button right here so you can watch that first, because her story is definitely complex and not one that you want to miss. We're going to start right where we left off, which is with you reuniting with your mom, and finding out that she maybe wasn't the person that you believed her to be.
It's kind of funny that I think about it now, because as an adult, you can kind of recognize moments in time where you question things.
Yes.
And I think for me, there was something in me that did know that there was no way, that I don't think that my mom was bipolar. That was something that they said about her, is that she was bipolar. And I knew that she had some extreme mood swings, but when she actually found out that she had a serious medical condition to where she had to have her thyroid removed because of the thyroid imbalances. And one would think that that's probably a lot of the reason why there was these huge mood shifts.
How many years ago was it that you two guys reconnected and really started to rebuild your relationship?
8, almost 9 years now. Well, actually, no, it's 9 years now. Because like I said, I called her the night that I got out of Aldern for the first time, like freely on the phone that I was given the night that I was left in Chapel Hill, and that I feel like I was abandoned, you know? And it's weird that I even have to say that I feel like I was abandoned, because like so many parts of me still don't like to accept that word,
You
even though I
were,
was left there.
you were abandoned, because, but I understand that um, these are extreme topics we're discussing, so I can relate to that too. It's sometimes hard to even admit the word abuse. I did not admit that for a very, very long time. I mean, up
Yeah.
until like the end of last year. Yeah.
Yeah, I really relate to that, because I feel like I can barely say that word sometimes. Like even in therapy, I'm like scared to sometimes. But I called my mom that night. We reconnected, and then she brought me home. And I think that that was a really good tool at the time, because I needed somewhere to stay that was safe, that wasn't on my own at 17. And it gave us this opportunity to really, we didn't really get a choice but to reconnect. And so suddenly I was there for the entire summer before I went to college. I had friends over, I had a boyfriend at the time as well, so it was like a good summer, and I remember that being a really fun summer. And one of the things that I really loved about that summer was the time I spent with my brother and her, but also the fact that she never condemned me for any of my decisions. And she just asked very gentle questions during that time. And during that time, it kind of made me think, should I start asking myself some questions? So I went away to college, and we still had a relationship, but obviously I'm at college. I'm not living with her, but I would come back and I would stay with her for like breaks and stuff. It was when I was 19, after I had gone away a year at college, and now I was back home working, working a job at a bakery. That was when I saw the parental alienation episode of Dr. Phil, like I mentioned on the last episode. And that was when we really bonded over something that we felt happened to us. And I'll be honest, I'm not sure it's the healthiest bond, you know?
Yeah.
Um, I'm not sure it is, but it is good to know that there is a name to this. reading as much as you can about it helps to make so much sense of things and the amount of manipulation that you go through.
Relate to a lot of that. So did it happen little by little that you guys kind of rebuilt your relationship, or did you ever come to her asking questions or admitting things that you'd been told and made to believe?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great question. So um, it was it was very slow in the beginning because I was very guarded at first. I had been told for such a long time that this woman was crazy. There was that little voice in the back of my head that was telling me, this person's not safe. You're not safe. What are you doing? And I fought that voice for such a long time because I was like, her actions are saying that she's safe, but
Yeah,
everything in my brain is telling me that she's not.
yeah,
And so when she asked questions, I got really defensive at first. I remember the first time that she started asking me questions just to kind of like fact check on things, like to see about like my experiences at the boarding schools, because she had no idea at the first boarding school about any of my care. And she had no idea about it at all. So she wanted to know, like, what the hell happened to me for 2 years?
yeah,
And
sure.
so I was very guarded at first, but once I came back home from college, I was around her more, I was working a job. I was kind of becoming an adult now. Like, because at college I hadn't quite yet become an adult. I was still working just a part-time job to support my little spending habit. And I was at college, so I didn't really feel like an adult yet. But now all of a sudden I have a job and I'm actually paying bills and I'm an adult now. So, once we started to kind of connect that way, it did become a little bit faster. And I did start asking questions and I did want to fact check.
I have the similar experience. You don't trust yourself. You don't trust anyone, many people around you. You don't trust. Yeah, it's really difficult. So I'm sorry that you go through that too.
I'm sorry you go through that too.
But do you think that as time goes on, you get closer and closer to knowing who your mom actually is?
I think so. Um, I think that I do see like the consistent patterns in her behavior now. And I see the consistencies in her personality.
Mhm,
And, you know, while patterns can sometimes be connotated as a bad thing,
mhm.
it means that I know her patterns now. And the patterns of behavior that I thought existed do not exist in the way that I thought that they did when I was alienated. There are still patterns, sure, but when you are overreacting and reacting instead of thinking before, like, because I feel like I was reacting before I would think about any of her behaviors or her
Yeah,
words or her actions. I was just reacting based on instinct. And now I can think as I'm watching her actions and I'm like, I can see why I overreacted about that before, but that is not that. Does that make any sense?
yes, it does, because at least, yes, it does make sense because I don't know if you can relate, but it was like it wasn't all lies made up out of thin air. It was a lot of it were lies, but believable lies, and then there was the exaggerated truth, you
Yes,
know.
exactly.
So
Exactly. A lot of exaggerated truth. And, I think it's funny now because it's like I was punished so hard for the exaggerated truths, or like when I would try to cover up my little lies because I was romantically involved with a boy or like something was going on that way. And yet they were exaggerating all of the truths the whole time. It was all projection.
what has the process been like for you to accept that this has been part of your story? And what is your relationship like with your with your dad and stepmom and then your mom now?
Mhm. Good questions. So I would say my relationship with the acceptance of parental alienation is like I'm still in the game of tug of war in my head. Some days it's hard and I have a hard time accepting that it was alienation.
Yeah.
And those are the days where I have to pull up the emails. Those are the days where I have to look the trauma in the face and go, look at what happened. And because I'm so used to not trusting myself, like you said, that it's hard for me to always accept it, especially if I'm having a down day.
Yeah.
And, then I have days where I'm like, yes, this is what happened to me. I'm fearless. I'm a boss. There are those days where like I feel like I can conquer the world and we can change the world and all this. But then I have those days too where it's kind of in between, where it's like a a constant state of chaos is how I would like to describe it. I like it's almost like a little scale, like a pendulum, and it kind of comes back and forth. And I don't think it's because I want it to be. I think it's just because of the patterns of so much gaslighting and mental brainwashing that it's going to take me a little bit more time to really be firm and be confident and trusting myself to know that, yes, this is the truth. I would say 90% of the time, yeah, I believe this is parental alienation. I feel it in my heart. But then I have those days where it's like, and I start to question things.
I know what you mean. I know I live that life of constantly questioning things and then having to pull up the proof or remember certain things that put it in. It's almost, I don't know, it almost feels as if it would be easier to not learn the truth sometimes, but then there's no way to move forward and heal. So
Hmm.
that's the temporary thought that doesn't go anywhere. For me at
Right.
least. I found it difficult to know who my targeted parent is. Have you experienced anything like that? It's like there's them, who's the real person, and then this monster, or in your case, like crazy portrayal of them that you believe through all this time. And then as you're trying to gather evidence for yourself, maybe you get closer and closer to the real version. But in my mind, it's like, how will I ever have an unfiltered, natural perception of who my father is, you know?
Yeah.
Can you relate to that at all?
I can actually. It's like, for me, it's a little touch different though, because there are times when my mom does have like crying fits or will come to me to console her. And it triggers me to this day. And it makes me think of the alienation. And it puts me right back to 15-year-old me. And my brain doesn't intentionally do it, but my brain sees it as evidence of, look, they were right.
Mm.
And then it's, I have to talk myself back down. And so I question everything. I question, do I really know this person? Are they actually who my alienators said they were? And then I question everything all over again. And it's become this, unfortunately, with me and my mother, it has become a cycle.
It's really close to home for me. The same thing happens for me with different things. It's not crying fits for me, but it's, if I analyze it, it all goes back to things that were talked about by my alienating parent. They were all,
Mhm, exactly.
it's like for me, it's him. Whenever he shows signs of being selfish,
And it's like you gather the evidence to support that thinking again. And it's like, wait, I've been working on this. Why is this happening again?
yeah, it really is. And I guess it's like holding both things in your head at the same time is hard, to think that maybe they do have crying fits and at the same time they still love me, and or oh, they can be selfish, but that doesn't mean that they don't love you and they're this bad person you believed. It's hard for
Right.
us because it was so um it was more
Black
black
and white.
and white the whole time. Yeah.
Yeah, literally. I mean, I totally relate with how you feel with that, because it really was so black and white. It was go or no. It
Hmm.
was, you can either stay or you can go, or you can, you know, I think back to this one memory, and I know that I'm jumping all the way back, but the when I was cut off from that boy the first time, like when they really cracked down hard on me and took away everything from me, there was one time where I called my mother and I hesitated because I was thinking about coming back home with her, because I knew that she would allow me to have this boyfriend. I knew that she would see that as a coming of age thing. I was 15, he was 17. It's not a huge deal to her. It's only 2 years, and also with our birthdays, it was like a year and a half actually, but anyways. Um, and so
What
I
stopped?
remember, like, I remember picking up the phone, and I remember telling my father, I told him, I was like, "I'm gonna go call mom and I'm gonna go live with her now." And I said it so shittily, like, I'm not gonna lie, like, I was so petty with the way I said it. And he said, "You know, you go there, you're never coming back."
Oh my gosh, so it was an ultimatum.
Oh, yeah. He also said some things, like, one of the things, my grandmother on my mother's side and I were really close. And when I kind of going back to the freedom ride, when I came home, we actually stopped by my grandma's house because I hadn't seen her in since my graduation. She came to my high school graduation at Aldern, and she wanted to see me. And my grandmother and I had a very close relationship. She always loved making sweet tea for me because she made her sweet tea perfect,
Mhm.
absolutely perfect every time. And her fried chicken was to die for. Um, I miss her
You're in the
all the time.
South. You're definitely in the South.
Yeah, and you know what? I am so happy I got her cast iron pans. I am so happy about that. But we came to her house just to see her on the way back home, and she told me, because she had asked my father, "What are you gonna do with Lauren now that she's out of high school? Like, what are you gonna do when she completes the EDGE program?" And he told her to her face, "Frankly, I don't know, and frankly, I don't care."
Mm,
And I think that's telling.
really sorry.
Thank you.
It's hard to
It's not
understand.
fair that we went through this, but I think what's important is like what you're doing now and making a project about it and speaking out about it. And, I hope that this kind of story hits home to a lot of people. And I hope that somebody out there starts to at least broaden their mind, broaden their thinking. And I think that that's what alienated children just have to do because you're so used to this rigid style of thinking. You have to be willing to just open your mind and just go with the flow for a little bit.
Have you found that once you started to open your mind about parental alienation, you've kind of questioned everything in your life? Like,
Yeah.
I don't know,
I
it's
didn't know
hard.
who I was.
Yeah, it's hard.
I did not know.
Is there anything else you'd like to share to any alienated parents out there or any adult children listening or anyone at all?
I think that the thing that we all have to do is just keep hope. You need to have some kind of light at the end of the tunnel. You need to have some kind of hope somewhere. For the parents out there, my story, I was not alienated for super long, but it's still a story of triumph. It's still a story of what happens. And I think that when your kid can get away from the external stimuli of alienating and constant alienating, then they may start to question things, especially as we come into adulthood. We are more likely to question our own reality and start making our own opinions as adults. Because you form opinions when you're a kid, but you don't form them until you really become an adult between the ages of 23 and 25. And I think that that's what you have to do is, and if you hear a voice in the back of your head saying, maybe this happened to me, explore that thought because it's talking for a reason. In EMDR, we call those parts. And that part is talking to you for a reason. And maybe you should listen.
Absolutely. It starts with critical thinking
Hmm.
and
Absolutely.
honestly putting your pride aside too and being
Yeah.
to admit that you've gotten things wrong for a long time.
Yeah.
But
And
go ahead.
I was going to say, the thing about, swallowing your pride is that, yes, you did make decisions in this, but also know that you were manipulated and you were a child. My therapist has to tell me this all the time. He was like,
Like,
"Listen, you were a child. The people who were supposed to protect you did not do that." And he kind of has to reality check me from time to time.
think you're doing it. Yeah, I think you're doing a good job of remembering to do that. I think I need that too. um, Thank you so much for sharing your story. I'm sure that it's going to give a lot of insight to alienated parents out there, and for adult children watching are probably going to hear a lot of familiar things from their own life resonating in what you're saying. And really appreciate your courage. And
Thank you.
hopefully we can make some changes together.
I'm hoping to. Yeah. One day at a time, 1 week at a time, 1 year at a time.